Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu and with me is Renuka, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses confidence on overcoming the second wave of COVID-19, urges states to use lockdown only as a last resort. UK announces plans to set up new international expert group to bolster world's pandemic preparedness and expedite vaccine development. India-EU leaders summit to be held in virtual format on the 8th of May owing to the COVID situation. Gap in economic growth between India and China to narrow due to unfavorable demographic transition in China, notes Chinese Central Bank report. And in cricket, Delhi Capitals take on Mumbai Indians in Chennai. As the number of the COVID cases are on the rise again, we appeal to our listeners not to lower the guard, follow all the precautions and all those over 45 years to get vaccinated without any hesitation. Stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asserted that the country has to overcome second wave of COVID-19 through resolve, courage and preparation and urged states to consider lockdowns only as the last resort. Addressing the nation on the COVID-19 situation this evening, Mr. Modi said the focus should be on micro-containment zones. He said, "We will take care of economic health as well as the health of the countrymen." The Prime Minister said the demand for oxygen has increased in many parts of the country and centre and the state governments along with the private sector are trying to make oxygen available to all those who are in need. Mr. Modi said the government is using multiple avenues to ensure the transport of oxygen. He said there will be new oxygen plants in the states and 1 lakh new cylinders will also be delivered soon. The Prime Minister asked the state governments to urge the workers to stay where they are. He said this trust given by the states to the migrant workers will help them. He added that states must tell migrant workers they will be vaccinated in next few days and their job will remain with them. Mr. Modi lauded doctors, paramedical staff, sanitation workers, police and healthcare workers for their commitments. He said in some cities, large dedicated COVID-19 hospitals are being built. He added that the country with 2 made in India vaccines started the world's largest vaccination program. Until now, more than 12 crore vaccine doses have been administered. Mr. Modi said all above the age of 18 years will be vaccinated from the 1st of next month. Mr. Modi expressed confidence that India will defeat COVID-19 pandemic and all need to work for the benefit of everyone in need of help, including migrant workers. He said the steps that the government has taken in the past few days will certainly help in the current COVID-19 situation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier on Tuesday said that the government has ensured that all the vaccine manufacturers not only get all possible help and logistic support, but also the process of vaccine approval is speedy and scientific. Interacting with vaccine manufacturers from across the country through video conferencing, Mr. Modi assured all possible support and smooth approval process for the vaccine candidates which are currently under trial phase. He said, throughout the process of developing and manufacturing vaccines, the country has constantly worked with the spirit of public-private partnership under the mission COVID Suraksha and created an end-to-end vaccine development ecosystem. Mr. Modi applauded the vaccine manufacturers for their achievements and professionalism. The representatives of the vaccine manufacturers in attendance thanked the Prime Minister for the government's decision of allowing vaccination for everyone above the age of 18 and various steps taken to give more incentives and flexibility.
Now let's take a look at the coronavirus updates from around the world. The United States has announced plans to expand its level 4 travel advisories to about 80% of countries worldwide, citing the unprecedented risk to travelers from the coronavirus. Washington has also barred entry to almost all non-US citizens who have recently been in most of Europe, China, Brazil, Iran and South Africa. The UK has announced plans to set up a new international expert group to help bolster the world's preparedness for the next pandemic and expedite the development of vaccines against future diseases. The Pandemic Preparedness Partnership (PPP) will be launched under Britain's presidency of the G7 summit in June this year. It will report to the G7 leaders. Meanwhile, the UK has added India to England's list of travel ban red list on Monday. The ban will come into effect from 4 a.m. British Standard Time on the 23rd of April. The UK government has justified the decision, saying that it is taken to help prevent the spread of variants of concern and protect the most vulnerable. Israel says it has registered 8 cases of the coronavirus variant initially detected in India and that it believes the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine is at least partly effective against it. The Philippines has approved emergency usage of the COVID-19 vaccine made by Johnson & Johnson and India's Covaxin by Bharat Biotech. These are the 5th and 6th vaccines to receive approval in the country. The Philippines Food and Drug Administration said both vaccines can be administered to people aged 18 and above. Johnson & Johnson is conducting late-stage clinical trials for its COVID-19 vaccine in the Philippines. Anita Anand for AIR World News.
In the midst of surging cases of COVID-19, the government of Bangladesh has extended the ongoing nationwide lockdown till 28th of April. The Cabinet Division, in its notification issued on Tuesday, said that all the previous restrictions will continue to be in force till the 28th of April. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
Welcome back to World News. Miguel Diaz-Canel will succeed Raul Castro as the Cuban Communist Party's first secretary, the most powerful position on the island. He is the first person outside of the Castros to run Cuba since the 1959 revolution. An electrical engineer by training, Diaz-Canel has been a party functionary for most of his life. He was born in Villa Clara, the province where Che Guevara broke the will of Fulgencio Batista's troops, bringing about the revolution. In today's Hotspot section, we are taking a closer look at this development. In conversation are Rangaraj Vishwanathan, former Indian ambassador to multiple Latin American countries, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the change that has taken place in Cuba, with Raul Castro announcing that he is resigning as the Cuban Communist Party leader, which eventually ends his family's 6 decades in power. The move, which was expected, also ends the era of former leadership by him and his brother Fidel Castro, which began with the 1959 revolution. Ambassador Vishwanathan, when you see this change happening in Cuba, how do you look at this? Do you feel that this is now the end of an era and the end of what we saw, a very powerful phase with both the Castro brothers, and there was this revolution which was there since 1959? Do you feel that with Raul Castro now stepping down, there would be a fundamental change in Cuba, or do you feel it is not going to change so much?
A planned change, not a historic change, is not going to create a disruption or a transformation or a revolution. It is all pre-planned. Of course, the name of Castro won't be there in formal official titles, but this Miguel Diaz-Canel, who has taken over as the chief of the Communist Party, he has been trained and groomed by the Castros over the last 5 years or so. Although he was born after the revolution in 1960 and belongs to a totally different generation from the revolutionary generation of Castros, he has been trained and the Castros have confidence in him that he is not going to upset the system like Gorbachev did in Russia. So it is as a known and trained and a person of trust and confidence of the Castros. So I don't expect any significant changes as long as Raul Castro is behind the scenes. He doesn't have titles, but he is still around.
Ambassador Vishwanathan, do you feel that the philosophy of socialism, communism, thing which will continue to rule Cuba, as you said, Raul Castro will remain behind the scenes. There might be a slight change, or we might see the beginning of a movement where you move away from the socialism, communism ideals. It's not going to change much, and Cuba will continue to hold whatever philosophy it has held for such a long time.
Well, it has been proven in history that 100% pure socialism and communism, or for that matter, even 100% capitalism, cannot survive. So they need to adapt. They need to change. They need to reinvent. We have cases like Russia, we have China, we have Vietnam, and of course, we have an exceptional case of North Korea, which is totally different. The Cubans have learned from Russia that you open up suddenly and you lose control. And the opponents of the revolution would take advantage. And the Cubans in Florida and the U.S. administration would be merciless, like they have been with Russia. At the same time, they have learned positive elements from China, from Vietnam, and I would say even Singapore. You don't need elections, voting, proper democracy, right? Singapore is flourishing, and it is not a proper democracy. Now, China has unleashed the entrepreneurship of the people, allowing them to make money, become rich, and live a good material life without changing the political system. And this is being followed by Vietnam also. So the Cubans have studied these, the negative example of Soviet Union and the positive example of China, Vietnam, and Singapore. And they are preparing to gradually open up and transition. But the only thing is, they are a poor country, and the system doesn't allow them to prosperity in immediate way. So they are struggling. They don't have natural resources. And earlier, their patron was, their main problem, apart from the internal system, was United States, which sort of kept Cuba poor and isolated by the sanctions, which was ruthless. Now, they survived with the support of Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, then Chavez came to their rescue. And Chavez gave them petroleum and money and material and moral support. That continued, which is being continued by Maduro also. But Venezuela is in much deeper trouble than Cuba now. So that window is also closing, and it has become uncertain. And without the external support and the limited scope for internal reforms, I guess Cuban people will continue to face challenges, problems of food, problems of consumer goods in the coming years.
Mr. Vishwanathan, when we speak of China and to some extent even of Singapore, do you feel that when we look at China and Singapore, we are also then looking at the absence of a lot of freedom, like the freedom of speech and expression, the controls on media, the controls on social media? How do those things then come into play? So how does one grow economically but keeping the liberties of the individual also intact? That not be a challenge. While we look at the positives, this would also be the negatives going forward for Cuba.
But Cuba is different. Cuba is part of Latin America, where people are more fun-loving and more relaxed and more into. Cubans are very talented people in music and dance and literature, sports, even in science and technology. They have advanced technology in certain niche areas of medicine and biotechnology. Right now, they are also developing vaccines for COVID. And our company called Biocon has got joint venture with Cuba using Cuban technology for producing biotech products. So there is this particularity of Cuban people, which is totally different from the Chinese. But generation of Cubans have been brainwashed, indoctrinated, and they have lived in the strict, rigid communist system. So mentally, they have also been conditioned. One doesn't know if the new generation will sort of get a fire in the belly and rise up against them. But I don't expect it in the next few years. Maybe after Raul Castro dies, maybe after another decade or so, there could be changes.
Master Vishwanathan, when we talk of Cuba, one of the important relations that Cuba has always shared is with the US, and it hasn't been a great relationship. We have seen that when Fidel Castro was in power, the United States and Cuba, they were constantly at loggerheads. We did see some improvement and thaw in ties when Obama became president, and there was this softening of ties, and Obama also went to Cuba. We saw President Trump then taking the step back again and reimposing the embargo. Do you expect that under the new US President, President Biden, do you feel that this could go back to the Obama time when ties between Cuba and US will be less confrontational, and this might ease things for Cuba a little bit?
Whatever Obama and Biden had achieved earlier, he reversed everything. But now Biden, who was involved in the Obama's opening to Cuba, he is in power. So the expectation is that, yes, he is definitely going to reverse the extremist policies of Trump. But the only thing is there has not been any significant statement about opening to Cuba. Obviously, they have other priorities of China, Russia, so many other issues. So Cuba has not been in the radar of the Biden administration. But surely things will ease, and Obama has admitted the mistake of United States in suppressing Cuba with unfair and unjust sanctions and the isolationist policy, and so many covert and overt programs to assassinate Fidel Castro and harm the country. He had admitted the mistake, and it was a correction needed on the part of United States. And that correction, which was initiated during Obama's time, I guess it would be put in motion sooner rather than later by the Biden administration. And the Cubans, of course, would welcome any opening from the United States. They are desperate.
Do you also feel, Ambassador Vishwanathan, it is a generational change? The generation which saw Fidel Castro come to power and the revolution take place. Today, the majority of Cubans are born after that. People are maybe not that drawn towards socialism as they were during that time. Do you feel that subtle shift, that generational shift will lead to also maybe a softening of bilateral ties somewhere?
Cubans, they no longer live by the staple diet of revolution, socialism, or death, those kind of slogans. They are open and they see what's happening around the world. They have greater exposure, and their mindset is different, as you said. So this would also accelerate Cuba's own gravitation towards United States and to the world in general.
Ambassador Vishwanathan, we've also seen that Cuba, when it comes to the fields of education and healthcare, and you were also referring to its participation in the development of the corona vaccine, we have seen that Cuba actually excels when it comes to education, especially healthcare. Do you feel that this is also an outcome of the way the state has grown?
Certainly, healthcare are two sectors in which are kind of poster achievements of Cuba. Healthcare for everyone and high literacy rate. And in healthcare, they have not only done well for them, but have also gone outside and punched above their weight in providing medical education and healthcare for the rest of the world. Like they have trained thousands of doctors from Latin America, and even some Indians have gone there for medical education. Once I remember, the Cuban vice minister was on a visit to India and he suddenly fell sick, and we admitted him to Gangaram Hospital. And guess what? The doctor who came to see the vice minister spoke perfect Spanish. He had gone to Cuba on a scholarship. So like that, the Cubans have provided free medical education to thousands of students, especially from Latin America and to other parts of the developing world. And they also sent their health workers, doctors, to many countries, to disaster zones. Like they even sent doctors to Italy at the height of COVID issue last year. And so this is part of their, like we talk about vaccine diplomacy, there is the healthcare diplomacy, and they have been successful. And they also provide the training even in sports. Like I think even in India, we had quite a few trainers from Cuba for some of our athletes. So there are certain niche areas in which they have made great achievements.
Ambassador Vishwanathan, we've seen that in Cuba, the tourism sector has always been one of the country's healthy sectors which has brought in people and money. But we've seen that because of the coronavirus pandemic, this has practically shut down Cuba's tourism sector and had caused an 11% economic contraction last year. The crisis has also triggered food shortages which have brought back memories of the early 1990s. And we've also seen, because of this food shortage, there have been calls for more political freedom in Cuba. Do you feel that all these factors will somehow get together and make Cuban leaders maybe move a little faster in opening the economy, or do you still predict that we will see a more gradual opening of Cuba and this is going to take a while before we see a significant shift in Cuba?
The Cubans have lived with the crisis one after the other from the revolutionary days, from 1950. They have survived, and they have great capacity and resilience to suffer through misery and survive. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, they didn't expect. So that was a shock. They survived it. They have also great capacity for sacrifice besides resilience. So I don't think this suffering and the problems and challenges now are anything new or in greater scale than what they had faced in the past.
Ambassador Vishwanathan, if you look back since 1959 and see first Fidel Castro and then Raul Castro, how would you look at this era when we've seen very powerful, very charismatic figure of Fidel Castro with his cigar and, as the leader of Cuba, then his brother? How do you sum up this era for the present generation?
Bunch of youngsters taking a boat from Mexico to Cuba and overthrowing a government with a large military force. That was sensational. And then afterwards, the Bay of Pigs and all the American interventions over and covered, the way Cuba survived, defended itself, and then went on the attack, that was dramatic. The Cuban Revolution was an iconic revolution, a historic revolution. And in the history of the world and for Latin America, they proved to the world that a small, vulnerable country can withstand the coercive power of a big bully with strength, with cleverness, with the diplomacy. In the world history, it's the Cuban Revolution and Fidel Castro would remain as something memorable, something of an inspiration, although that was a different time.
India, in consultation with the EU and Portugal, has decided to move the India-EU Leader Summit into a virtual platform. The Ministry of External Affairs confirmed the decision through a statement on Tuesday. Official spokesperson of the ministry said that in view of the COVID-19 situation, the India-EU Leaders meeting will now be held in a virtual format on the 8th of May 2021. It added that the India-EU Leaders meeting in the EU plus 27 format is the first time that such a meeting is being held. The spokesperson said that it reflects the shared ambition of both sides to further deepen the strategic partnership.
China is grappling with the problem of aging population and dwindling workforce due to its demographic transition, owing particularly to its stricter birth policies. A report released by the People's Bank of China, PBOC, China's central bank, said that China should immediately liberalize its birth policies to tackle the problems of an aging population and plan to compete economically with a demographically young India and an immigration-friendly U.S. In a detailed section on India, the report said the gap between the two countries is narrowing. As two big countries in Asia, China's economic growth has been faster than India's for a long time, but in recent years, China's demographic dividend fading, India's economic growth has tended to approach China's, the report said. In a rare, frank assessment, it added that China's aging population and the declining birth rate will become more serious in 10 years, while India's demographic structure will be further optimized. Meanwhile, India's ambassador to China, Vikram Misri, has termed inadvisable the tendency to sweep the situation at the border under the carpet and characterize it as just a minor issue and a matter of perspective. He said that such a mindset can only take the two countries further away from a sustained solution and deeper into an unfulfilling stalemate. Ambassador Misri was speaking at an online event between India and Chinese think tanks, which was also addressed by Chinese ambassador to India, Son Wai-dong, among others.
External Affairs Minister of India Dr. S. Jaishankar said that regional and sub-regional organizations have demonstrated their important role in the maintenance of international peace and security. Speaking at the UN Security Council on enhancing cooperation between the UN and regional and sub-regional organizations.
To face such diverse challenges, we need coordinated and concerted action across borders. We think that enhanced cooperation between the UN and regional and sub-regional organizations will be an important factor in successfully addressing such contemporary challenges and conflicts.
Moving on to sports, in IPL cricket, chasing a target of 138 runs, Delhi Capitals were 101 for 3 in 15 overs against Mumbai Indians at M.A. Chidambaram Stadium, Cheer Park in Chennai, when reports last came in. Batting first, Mumbai Indians scored 137 for the loss of 9 wickets in the 20 overs with the help of Rohit Sharma's 44 runs. For Delhi Capitals, Amit Mishra took 4 wickets while Avesh Khan scalped 2 dismissals. Earlier, Mumbai Indians won the toss and decided to bat. Meanwhile, the International Cricket Council has announced that the World Test Championship final between India and New Zealand will go ahead as planned in Southampton from June 18 to 22nd. This assurance came after Britain added India to its travel red list following a massive surge in COVID-19 cases. ICC has expressed confidence in staging the WTC final in a biosecure environment. In football, a day after the announcement of breakaway European Super League, UEFA President Alexander Seferin has made direct appeal to the owners of the English clubs to change their minds out of respect for football fans. This has come after he threatened to ban players from international competition a day earlier.
The Sensex and the Nifty today closed with losses of around 0.5%. The domestic stocks declined amid the negative cues from global equity markets as resurgence of coronavirus cases worldwide and fresh restriction to check its spread dented investor sentiment. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Washington Post writes that Biden will hold a big climate summit this week to re-establish U.S. leadership. Writing on the passing away of former U.S. Vice President Mondale, Washington Post writes that Mondale lost the presidency but permanently changed the office of vice presidency. Wall Street Journal reports that satellite images show Russia's expanding Ukraine buildup. The Telegraph writes that EU sanctions on Myanmar junta figures. The Guardian reports that Boris Johnson threatens to use legislative bomb to stop European Super League. Globe and the Mail writes that Britain's Queen enter a new phase of her reign after death of husband Prince Philip. Gulf Time reports that scientists in Chile discover remains of plant-eating dinosaur.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses confidence on overcoming the second wave of COVID-19. Urges states to use lockdown only as a last resort. UK announces plans to set up new international expert group to bolster world's pandemic preparedness and expedite vaccine development. India-EU Leaders Summit to be held in virtual format on the 8th of May owing to the COVID situation. Gap in economic growth between India and China to narrow due to unfavorable demographic transition in China, notes Chinese Central Bank report. And in cricket, Delhi Capitals take on Mumbai Indians in Chennai. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Cuba.
Sakala lokama saune bande nindana kare kenire vachaka samana niskala rake tanadana janani kenire Vaishnava janato teni kaiye pile parai
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.